Well, welcome everyone. I'm Ashley Klingensmith, the State Director of Americans for Prosperity, Pennsylvania. I am so grateful to have you join us for the next in our series of congressional conversations on some of the most critical issues our federal lawmakers are considering. You know, the threats of additional top-down big spending and energy policies that are driving inflation and increasing our gas prices are what so many of you tuning in right now are helping us to fight back against. And for that, we are so grateful. Together today, we're going to glean additional insights and also have a new form of action for you to take. So I'm thrilled to introduce the two gentlemen joining. First, Akash Chougule. He serves as Vice President of Americans for Prosperity, formerly served as a staff member at the U.S. House Committee on Education and Labor, and his work has been featured in outlets that range from Fox News to USA Today. And I am so thrilled to introduce our other guest, Congressman Fred Keller, who represents constituents of PA's 12th Congressional District. He's currently serving his second term in Congress, which followed 5 terms in Harrisburg at our state house, where he was one of AFP's champions. He was a strong voice for responsible budgeting. He stood for taxpayers over Harrisburg bloat, and he has always been a strong voice for small business owners. Before his time in public service, he enjoyed a 25-year career at Conestoga Wood Specialists, which inspired his fierce advocacy for workers and businesses alike. He is currently a member of the House Committee on Education and Labor and the House Oversight and Reform Committee. He is the quintessential happy warrior, which is so perfectly appropriate given that his district includes Happy Valley, which is where Penn State is located for those of you tuning in from outside PA. But gentlemen, welcome. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Ashley. Congressman Keller, thank you so much for joining us. I think I just want to open it up with a high level question. Obviously, top of mind right now for people are gas prices, grocery store prices. We just learned that the average American family will spend an additional $5,200 in additional costs because of inflation. What are you hearing from employers, constituents about the impacts of this? We all see the gas prices on the side of the road, but what if people may not be aware of that's having an impact because of these higher prices?
Yeah, it's actually a great point. And you talk about that $5,200. People are going to have to earn that. Think about that. To purchase what you purchased last year, when it comes to running your home or your business, you're going to have to work and earn another $5,200. And you think about that. That's a lot of money for people that are running their business or struggling to make ends meet. And we're hearing from businesses about this because they can't pass all that cost along in the cost of their goods and services, and that's what's driving the inflation. And the reason that's been created is because of the reckless spending coming out of the Biden administration and Democrats when you've had one party in control for the last 15 months. It just has really been bad policy that's created labor shortages. It's created, the supply chain issues that we're seeing, and it's created the inflation. So there's people that really want us to make sure that we're being responsible. And keeping in mind that when you look at the president's upcoming budget, he wants to spend $73 trillion over the next 10 years. That would take our national debt from just over 30 trillion to over $45 trillion by 2032. Now, look at the priorities that they have. It's not about good government, and it's not about the things I've always said. And having worked in a factory, you mentioned Ashley, that I was at Conestoga for 25 years. I started working in a factory right out of high school, and learned the value of hard work. I knew that growing up as a kid, but you learned it when you earned your paycheck and saw the taxes coming out of it. And I've always looked at it this way. that whoever controls how you earn your money and how much of it you get to keep controls more of your actions. And this budget that the Democrats and the president is proposing is about control, because they're looking to try and keep, not only are they looking at expanding spending, but they're looking at increasing taxes. And that is just not good public policy. And take a look at what happens when you're talking about the debt that we're going to incur. The Biden administration obviously does not value our children and their future, because he's piling this debt on them. But then keep in mind at the current debt we have, Social Security Administration currently holds about 13% of that debt. Now we pay interest on debt, and you look at the interest payment of I think it's around $300 million, $350 million a year. That's only on debt held by the public. That's not on debt that's held by other government agencies like Social Security. So let's talk about our seniors. You know, they're lending money for this spending, but where are they getting the return on that money? We're not paying interest on. I mean, that's not calculated in our interest payments.
Yep.
We can put the number out there of here's what it should be, but it's not happening. So what is this administration? What are the Democrats that have been in control for the last 14 or 15 months? What have they valued? They've valued more government spending and control over your life. That was evidenced when President Biden took office and shut down the Keystone Pipeline, and all those jobs went away. When they got us back in the Paris Climate Accords, all the things that they created, the energy crisis that we're seeing, is driving up prices. That's the problem I see with the policies coming out of Washington, D.C. under one-party control for the last 15 months or so.
Congressman, you mentioned energy in particular, and in your state, your district, obviously, energy is a major driver of prosperity and jobs, and obviously makes a huge impact across our country and across our economy. Like I said, much of which comes from beneath the feet of your constituents there in Pennsylvania. You know, as this crisis in Ukraine has worsened and the global energy markets have been thrown for a loop here, we've heard a lot of folks say that Pennsylvania alone could make such a huge impact on the supply and the cost of energy in this country. What impact has the administration's regulatory agenda had? Not just we've seen the macro impact, but specifically on your district. What have you seen the impact of those energy policies in addition to higher gas prices?
You know, Akash, that's a great point. On any given day, up to 10% of the nation's dry natural gas comes out of PA12. So it's huge for energy, not just for Pennsylvania, but for our nation and our allies. And just another point, in addition to energy, education. We have, it was Capital Oil and Gas, or now Coterra, have invested in the Lackawanna School of Petroleum and Natural Gas, okay? So they've done that. They've built at the Susquehanna Career and Technology Center a CDL course. So they've put a lot of money into education. So it's not just energy, but they've invested in our communities for jobs. Prior to the pandemic and when we had really good energy policy, the wages in Susquehanna County, which is located right between Binghamton and Scranton, okay? Those people in that area were able to, with a 2-year education program, come out and earn $60,000 a year. Those are good wages without a lot of debt. So it's not just energy, it's all the things that it supports. The policies have been terrible. I mean, we can't build pipelines, permits, you know, they talk about leases, and all these leases have been executed, and they're not developing. These gas and oil companies aren't developing, and they have these leases. Well, if you have a lease, you have to go through DEP in Pennsylvania or EPA, you know, and all these regulations that you have to jump through all the hoops to get your permits so that you can drill. But you also need pipelines, and you need the infrastructure to deliver that energy to the market. So I might have leases and been doing some exploration, but if I can't put it in a pipeline and get it to market, that lease isn't doing me a lot of good. So when you look at the regulatory environment over pipelines, when you look at what's happening over the development, I mean, look at what they've done to shut down exploration on federal lands. That's been so detrimental to our energy policy. and the fact that our businesses now have to pay more. I looked at my gas bill, and from a year ago, in February, it was up about 38%. That's to heat my home.
Wow.
So
Unbelievable.
it
Friends,
is.
yeah, we know that folks are feeling this pain at the pump when they pay their bills for their home to heat it, and so we have just launched our Pay More, Get Less campaign to highlight some of these issues right to the inboxes of your members of Congress. So make sure they hear from you. They should hear from you almost daily if you can make that time. But it is so easy. Visit americansforprosperity.ivolunteers.com, sign the top banner letter entitled Congress Can Stop Inflation. There are real policy solutions that could be, enacted immediately if Congress would just take action. We just spent some time talking about this bloated plan of the president's budget. We've talked about the impact of inflation. Akash, can you just share a little bit about our policy solution, about a unified budget process? I think sometimes when people hear about the national debt and those numbers, it is so overwhelming. And there's a sense that we've already kind of reached a point of no return. But I want to hear, how we have proposed, Congress could tackle this and start reversing the trend straight away.
Yeah, absolutely, Ashley. So as you mentioned, we've launched this, what we call the True Cost of Washington campaign, because as the Congressman touched on, it is Washington's overspending that's driving this inflation, but it's not a problem that we can't solve. And so what our team has rolled out, one of the budget reform proposals is called a unified budget. Now, you often hear this anecdote that government doesn't function like a family budget where things aren't necessarily competing against each other when it comes to discretionary, mandatory spending. And these are complicated terms, but basically all we're proposing is that all spending and all revenue should be packaged within the same bill, right? Make different expenditures compete against one another, make sure that members of Congress are all really involved in that process. Right now, it's such a top-down, leadership-driven process. There's such little voice for the average member of Congress, and it really minimizes the voice of champions like Congressman Keller and how loud they can be in that process. The unified budget, making sure that all spending and all revenue is competing against one another, would help address that. So that's just one of a number of solutions you can learn about on the truecostofwashington.com. And this is going to be a campaign that's spanning across 8 states plus Pennsylvania, 9 states and the District of Columbia. And we're really looking for folks to engage because, as the Congressman has been touching on, it is these bad government policies on spending and energy regulation that are making life more expensive for all Americans, and particularly hitting hardest those on fixed incomes and low income across our country.
If I can just throw something out there as we're talking about budgeting process, you have the budget and you can put together the best budget you want to in Congress, right? But it comes down to the appropriators. I mean, there's the budget and they might do this and, oh, it sounds good. Here's our budget that's going to balance this X amount of years. But when it comes to the appropriators that are appropriating the money, they need to tie those appropriations to that budget. And that oftentimes doesn't happen in Washington, D.C. So we really need to push for that to happen, because you have the budget committee. Okay, they put together the budget. But when you see the appropriations bills coming through, that's really where the money gets spent. And that doesn't always match up to what the budget was. And that's what we need to demand that people do. And you mentioned that government isn't like running a household budget or a business. And everybody says government isn't a business. No, but it's an enterprise. And any enterprise has to be run well to make sure. I mean, how many people can continually spend more, have more in expenditures than what they've had in revenue for such a sustained period of time? We've really got to get this under control.
Congressman, one of the things that your staff highlighted for us about you are your humble beginnings and sort of how you ended up in Pennsylvania. And I just mentioned that these higher inflation costs, they are hitting lower income folks particularly hard, and higher energy costs in particular. We know that energy poverty is an issue, and low income folks spend a larger share of their income on energy costs. So tell us a little bit about sort of that background that you grew up with and how that's informing how seriously you're addressing these issues of inflation and higher energy costs.
Well, as I've mentioned to people, and I didn't talk a lot about how I grew up until I ran for Congress, because and because I think people need to understand that because someone doesn't have a lot of income, and we grew up poor, and everybody says we were poor and we didn't know it. It was clear to us, but people who are poor aren't unintelligent. My parents were very smart people. Okay, that's not the case. But in America, if you work hard, you can achieve. You can achieve, and you can do well for yourself. That's the American dream. I've lived that. But when you're looking at it, it's what you spend your money on and the decisions you make. And that goes back to that's what's formulated my saying, and that I've said to people, what I believe. Whoever controls more of your money, how you earn it, and how much of it you get to keep controls more of your actions. And it's a matter of treating people with dignity and knowing that, guess what? If they work a hard day's work, they should be able to keep more of their money. They shouldn't have the government putting roadblocks in the way, whether it's taxes, whether it's regulation. People want to do what's right, and they take very good care. I mean, I look at our farmers, I look at the people in our community, business people. They care about the community they live in, and they help one another. We don't need the government to tell us to do it. We look at. I asked the Secretary of Labor a year ago. I said, my experience getting out of high school and working in a factory, I knew the people that ran the business, that owned the company. They cared about me. They wanted me safe. They cared. I said, and when I ran that factory and managed a factory with 230 some employees, I cared. That's my experience. That's what I believe. And I asked the secretary if he believed that. He said, well, I'd like to. I said, no, how you answer that depends upon how you're going to run the department.
Mm-hmm.
It took me 3 tries to get him to say he believed it. And I think he only did it because he knew I was going to keep asking him, wasn't going to stop. But that's what I believe about the American people. They're thoughtful. They work hard. The American people care. We just need to show as government that we want to be supportive of them and not tell them how to live their lives.
Absolutely.
There's a big difference.
Absolutely. I'd love for you both to address this to whatever extent you would like. But I think one of the things we're hearing in the field throughout all of our field offices, from Pittsburgh to Scranton to Philly and everywhere in between, is people want to be prepared for what is coming next. So can you both just kind of speculate, if the status quo continues, if we don't address some of these issues through some of the reforms we've already touched on, what are some of those additional impacts Americans should sort of brace for over the next several months and throughout the summer?
Yeah, and I want to hear what the congressman has to say, particularly from his district. But nationally, one of the major price increases that we're going to be facing are food costs, right? The cost of everything is going up with energy, but that means the cost of producing. That means fertilizer costs, agricultural costs, transportation costs, and we haven't really even seen the vast majority of that impact yet. And so that's going to get worse before it gets better. There are things the administration could do on the regulatory side, of course, things Congress could do that we're pushing for. But again, Ashley, that's really what our True Cost of Washington campaign is about, is making sure that people know how bad policy is driving these cost increases. But Congressman, love to hear from you as far as what folks should keep an eye out for over the next several months.
Well, you laid it out very well as far as the supply chain issues when it comes to the necessities. When we take a look at what we're going to need, as far as food, as far as energy, people being able to get to work. What the president needs to do right now that would be beneficial is take us out of the Paris Climate Accords, open up exploration on federal lands, start the Keystone XL pipeline, review the regulation and take that away so that we can get exporting LNG to our allies. Now everybody's gonna say, well, that's gonna take time to do. But if we're serious about it and we show the world we're serious about it, that will immediately stabilize energy prices, because they're gonna know that the United States is committed to making sure that we're not dependent on adversaries and people who want to do harm around the globe for energy. I mean, there isn't anything we're going to be able to do. Another thing we need to be careful of is how much of our farmland that China owns. I mean, they own quite a bit of farmland. So we need to watch that and make sure that we're not allowing anybody to get a foothold in the United States that could control our food supply. So there needs to be policies around about what can happen there. So supporting agriculture, and I know they're looking at the waters of the U.S. That we should not be monkeying with. I think the Trump administration did a good job in rolling back the Obama plans. We need to make sure that the Trump era policies stay in place, because the last thing in the world our farmers are going to need, because they're going to be dealing with issues of higher costs for fertilizer, for seed, for all the things they need, parts for their tractors, their combines, their machinery. Labor is going to cost them more. The last thing they need is more regulation from the federal government. And here again, I'm going to go back to the thing that I know. Our farmers care about the land because that's how they make their living. So American farmers, American energy producers do these things better than anybody in the world. We need to unleash that entrepreneurial spirit. We need to unleash that powerhouse of American energy and American agriculture. And just to show that we do it, look at without being in the Paris Climate Accords, without all that stuff, look how much we've reduced our emissions. We are the only nation that actually met the Paris Climate Accords, and we weren't even in it under the Trump administration. And we did that, and we became energy independent for the first time in my life. I'd like to get back to where we were with a thriving economy, with energy independence, with putting America's interests first, where we were just a little more than a year ago.
Yep, absolutely. Well, friends, again, we are about action at Americans for Prosperity. So we have dropped that letter entitled "Congress Can Stop Inflation. Hold Your Members Accountable Now." Please take 30 seconds to sign that. Akash and Congressman, I'm going to give you the last word. But as a Pennsylvanian, and I know I speak for our entire staff here, Congressman, we cannot wait to see what is next. For folks watching in the redistricting conversation, and subsequent maps, your district was eliminated. And so, but I know that we are going to work with you long into the future. It's been an absolute pleasure. And there is still, much of the session to go. So our eyes and ears will be on what's happening. But we just thank you. I know it takes courage and gumption to do what you do. And so we're just so grateful. Akash, I'll give you and the Congressman the last word.
Sure. Want to give you the last word, Congressman, but again, having worked with you in a couple different capacities on the Labor Committee and now here at AFP, again, just want to echo Ashley's words, say thank you. You've been a champion of our values and our causes on labor and energy, taxes, spending, really across the board on these pocketbook issues that, as you've talked about, really impact people every single day, all across the country, and of course in your district and in the state of Pennsylvania. So really just want to say thank you, and we'll give you the last word as we wrap up here.
No, I just really appreciate it, Akash and Ashley and everybody watching. The work we do and our team does every day, and it's been since I've gotten into office, even in Harrisburg and in DC, is a reflection of the outstanding people that give me the privilege to do the work that I do. It would not be possible for us to get the work done that we get done. And I know I've worked with Americans for Prosperity over the years because the values that you push for are the values of the people of PA-12, of our Commonwealth, and of our nation. And I just look forward to being able to finish this term, which ends in January of 2023. I still got a job to do every day, all day long, 100% effort, like I do on any job. But looking at being involved, and I just want to encourage the people that are watching and the people all across America, be engaged with what's happening, because it is your money that you entrust. That we actually, I tell people government takes. People don't get it, we take it. I oftentimes, and I'll just do this because I was talking to somebody, and they talk about the Tax Cut and Jobs Act, and they said, "Oh, look at all the money that was given out." No, when you have a tax cut, you're not giving anything; you're taking less. Okay. And I think that's an important thing we need to do, because it goes back to the core principle that I believe. Whoever controls more of your money and how you earn it and how much of it you keep controls more of your actions. And that's why I look forward to working with Americans for Prosperity, because we want to make sure that the American people keep their money as much as they can. I get it takes money to run government, and we have to do that, but we should be doing it responsibly. And that's not what's happening in Washington, D.C. right now, when we have a proposal to spend $73 trillion over the next 10 years. So I will continue to fight for the values of the American people, of Americans for Prosperity, because we share those same values. So thank you for having me.
We so
Thank you
appreciate
so much.
it. Thank you both so much.
Thank you. Have a good day.
You
too.
too.
Happy Easter.
You too.